Everybody ready to crank it up?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Go for it.
All right. So welcome to the Elk Creek Fire Protection Board of Directors meeting for August 8th at, we'll call it 6 o'clock. So that's a call for the meeting to order, and I'll ask Director Barrett to lead us in the pledge tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. To the new business. Chief, would you like to introduce the mill levy discussion?
Certainly. So we've got a number of things that need to be taken care of at this meeting. We need to have the resolutions in place and the interlocal agreements so that those can go to the various counties. And once they have those interlocal agreements in place, then they're going to start, taking the next step of the process. But largely that has to do with the fact that we are going to have to pay each of the counties our share of conducting that election. And that share will be determined somewhat as it goes. A fair number of it is predictable in advance, but a fair bit of it will be addressed as we're going through the process. The question came up earlier regarding budgeting for that, and as of this time last year when we were doing the budget, we did not anticipate having a mill levy on the election, so it is an unbudgeted item that we'll have to either pull from reserves to conduct or cut from other areas within the budget. Again, we have cut 2 positions, so there will be some funding available from that. However, we also are running short on anticipated revenue because of the lack of fire agreements during the year. But one way or the other, it's not certainly going to break the reserves when you're doing the coordinated election. The other piece that is going to have to get done before the next meeting is adopting the language for the measures, and so part of that means that at tonight's meeting the board will have to vote on which pieces of the discussed items will be added to the ballot this time around. And to kind of explain all those, there was the discussion about extending the temporary mill levy, which is set to expire at the end of 2022, and that is at the 2.5 mil 10-year levy. The second piece that was discussed was what's called de-Gallagher, and essentially what that is a question to the public that says that if the residential assessment rate is lowered by the state again in the future, can the fire district then increase the millage amount so that we continue to get the same amount of funds? And you recall that from that 2.5 mills that were elected in 2013, 50% of those funds are not coming to us anymore because of that reduction. So essentially it was half of the funding that the voters put in place disappeared because the state changed the formulas. And those formulas, basically change based on the ratio of residential property to total business and income in the state. And usually that's not, property taxes paid by the businesses in a strip mall or anything like that. What impacts that is almost all oil and gas. So over the last several years, the value of homes in the Denver metro area has gone up. Oil and gas prices have been depressed for 3 years in a row now. And so as a result, they've had to keep pushing down the rate that residential property owners pay to keep it below the 45% maximum that the state allows. And that's not 45% of our district, that's 45% statewide. So essentially, we've got areas that have seen explosive growth, like Castle Rock, where that's had very little impact, and other places in the state, especially the more rural areas, that have had a huge impact from it because they've not seen growth in the housing market. And looking at our numbers, the growth in the housing market here has been relatively slower than you would expect given the Denver market. And I think that's largely because of a large part of our district is essentially built out. And so the number of new homes is not very great, except for the proposed like multifamily developments and stuff that are not currently going in. And it also appears that the county has been more conservative on their estimates of the values of the homes within the area compared to actual sales figures or the increase in value in the more metropolitan areas. So those combined have essentially, again, taken about 50% of that 2.5 mil number out of our budget. And then in addition, we've lost funding from both the ambulance revenue and from the, this year in particular, from the lack of federal reimbursements. This year is also, we're done with the grants that have funded the chipping program. And we still have the direct homeowner grants that are paying for the mitigation, but the chipping program is not going to continue to be funded following this year. So
without some action.
Without some action, that's correct. Okay. So the other two pieces that came in discussion was a mill levy increase and potentially a bond issue. And the bond issue would be to replace the fire stations. And the main reason that the district would consider a bond issue would be to essentially pay for those facilities in the near future and have the cost of it carried over time. One of the other pieces of Tabor that most people don't realize is that the fire district is prohibited by Tabor from borrowing money. We can't borrow money at all. So we can't mortgage or build a fire station. The only way it can be done is through a bond issue. The downside of a bond issue is that there's a fairly significant cost. So when you take that bond issue out, the first $50,000 or so is going to go to pay legal fees and bond sales. So it's not a super cost-effective way to do things, and it should not be done until the district is ready to move on a project, because once those bonds have been taken out, they have to be spent within a number of years. So we would have to immediately move to doing those construction projects. And I would say that at this point, we are not prepared to do that. It's going to take a number of years of planning, locating property, and coming up with, essentially the budget and everything, so that if the district does take out bonds, that process can start. Knowing the timeline of construction projects, 3 years from just wanting to do it to having the project done and completed is not really feasible. We have to do all that groundwork in advance, So my recommendation on the bond issue would be to basically put that off until such a time as the need is more urgent and we are, have the background work done for that. Okay. The question had come up about combining the Gallagher, the mill levy extension and the potential mill levy increase language, and going back and forth with our legal advisors. They have said that they believe that Tabor will not allow that because one of the provisions of Tabor is that any Tabor question has to address only one issue. So each issue has to be posed as a separate question.
So that means the question of dealing with the expiring tax increase is separate from what we want to do in terms of raising a mill.
That is correct, yeah.
Despite what we want to do, we can't do it the way we'd like to.
Exactly. And so my recommendation on that would be to move ahead with the mill levy question and basically table the extension question until 2023 when that comes up. And largely that's because the more questions that we're putting on the ballot, the more we're asking of the voters at one time, I would say the more likelihood it is that they would either opt for only one or two of those questions, or choose not to fund them at all. So I would recommend the simplest thing to do moving forward, it would be to look at the mill levy increase as a standalone question and consider bonds and consider the 2.5 mil renewal in the future.
What about this Gallagher situation?
I think the Gallagher, you could include that on the ballot. It would not be much additional cost to put it on there. There would be some, but it would not be this. It would not double the cost of putting the issue on the ballot. The thing about the Gallagher though is that first off, the state may come up with a statewide fix for this, and the question, even when it is posed as simply as possible, is confusing. I would say that overwhelmingly, the majority of the public don't understand what we're asking in that question. And we could put that on. There would be additional education that would have to go along with, educating people on the Gallagher question in addition to the mill levy question. So that would be, that would be the biggest kind of issue I'd say about not including it.
Chief, weren't there a number of other districts last fall that did that?
That is correct.
And weren't they successful?
Largely they were,
Okay.
yes. A handful of them did, have the two questions on the ballot, and most of them were successful, and most of the individual Gallagher questions were successful, but there was also a fairly extensive campaign that went along with each of those. So that would be I don't think that it would hurt to include it, but I think that there would be, again, that additional education piece of explaining what this sentence means in terms of saying, if the residential rate falls, you agree that we can raise the rate so that you pay the same amount in the following year.
I wonder, since we're talking about a fairly substantial increase on the mill, whether we ought to just concentrate on that.
I think that that might be a good option. I think that most of the damage from Gallagher has already been done in this kind of.
We can
economic
always bring the
cycle.
Gallagher thing up anytime.
That is correct, yeah.
What do you think the odds are the state would take care of it?
I would say they're actually fairly low, because it will require a constitutional amendment. And, you know, I don't think that it's definitely not going on any ballot this year. But it's also been pushed off now for 2 more years. So we have until that next cycle. Right now, you know, over the last several decreases, we've lost, you know, roughly 15%. The next forecast, if it happens in 2 years, is only going to be a couple percent. So it's less of an issue than, you know, it's basically kind of barn door after, you know, the horse is left. You know, it does not fix the decreases that happened, you know, over the last 5 years.
That's done.
That is done in the mill levy increase.
Right. So you bring up a great question, Alec. What do you guys think about, you know, Alec's question specifically on the Gallagher amendment? You've seen on this, you know, slick paper document right here that I was going to say as slick as I am, but I thought that would be inappropriate. So strike that. But you know, what do you all think about this?
I think a single issue would be an easier approach for us to sell. That would be my approach. I think that the significant effects that we would have to benefit the department in terms of getting the mill levy increase passed would outweigh the effect of de-Gallagherizing at this time. So I think if we put our money on, or if we put our efforts towards getting the mill increase through an educational period, informing the constituents what the benefits would be, we would be in a better position in the long term to address the Gallagher amendment. So my opinion would be just to focus on the mill levy increase solely.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
I think the return on investment for the effort to get the de-Gallagherization into the ballot just isn't there. And if we're talking about a couple of percent next time around, that's a huge effort for us to do on very short notice. And we've got time, if it looks like it isn't going to work, to do it in the future, May, for instance. So, yeah, I'd vote for, out of all these, bond issues and out years problem that I think we need to address when it's obvious it needs to be addressed. And after we get sufficient planning in and actually find 5 acres to go build a new fire station. And on the 2.5 mil expiration, I agree. I think we ought to just wait on that because that's 5 years almost down the road yet. And a lot can change in 5 years. So I would vote with the just putting the mill levy increase.
A singular item.
Single issue on the ballot, make it easy, and stick with the numbers that we've got.
Okay. Does anyone see it differently? Or want to discuss further any of the items that we've been talking about?
I think one message is definitely a stronger message than trying to dilute it.
And it might be perceived that we're trying to force a whole bunch of things down.
Sure. Even though we're not, but fair point.
Well, I think the county is going to have a de-Gallagherization issue on the ballot.
The debrucing, which is
Yeah,
slightly
debrucing.
different, but yeah.
I think, well, so could be a Me Too issue there if we get too close to the county, because I don't think they're going to come out very well on that one.
potential point of confusion.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's, wait till we can make it a single issue for us.
Okay.
Or perhaps the state might affect change that would benefit us in the long term.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't know what the number of districts, but there's a whole lot of districts that are negatively affected, like us, you know, by this. It seems scandalous, really, for the state to not do something, but I wouldn't count on it either. You know, quite frankly.
It's an interesting situation in that it's a state law, but it does not affect the state government in any respect. It affects primarily only school districts and fire districts.
Yeah.
So would we need to make a motion during this portion of the meeting to incorporate the mill levy increase solely, or would that be, how would we approach that?
So I think we will make a motion. I don't think we, Jane, Chief, correct me, I don't think we need to make a motion yet. I mean, this is just a point of discussion, but if ultimately it seems we're in agreement that we're just going to do the mill levy increase, we don't have to make a motion for that, just that, do we? We do need to
So-
get to a number, correct?
The next kind of deadline is actually September 6th.
Okay.
And by that date, we have to submit the ballot language to the county. And unfortunately, that's kind of a tight time frame because that comes ahead of your next meeting.
Right?
And so there's two options. We could look at the draft language that the lawyer provided this evening, or we could plan to have a special meeting before, September 6th to approve the ballot language.
Okay.
I would be in favor of moving ahead now. The only thing is that the statement of what we're gonna use the money for, I think needs some improvement. Because items 2 and 3 are essentially the same. So I don't.
He just sent this over about a half an hour ago.
Yeah,
and,
so,
Yeah.
so can we in principle adopt the 5.085 mil increase and approve this ballot language, subject to editing by the fire chief and council with regard to specifying what the funds will be used for?
I don't know if that would be permitted. I believe you have to vote on
The language.
the language that'll go in there. And again, if you want to do a special meeting, I mean, this would probably be the only topic on it. Or we could try to address that with changing the language as he has, included here. With that, it may be okay to provide direction on the language if the amount is approved. The reason I say that is because we do not have the dollar figure that's going to get plugged into this. That has to be is supposed to be provided by the county. The preliminary statement of value for the district, essentially how much assessed value is in the district following appeals of property tax, but we do not have those yet. So if we were to put a number in there, it potentially would not be the same number that it would end up with. So because of those two things, my suggestion would be to go ahead and say we'll have a special meeting at the end of the month or at the very beginning of September to approve that. That would be, I think, the cleanest way to do that.
So I agree with you, Alec. I mean, I'd rather do it tonight too. I suspect we all would.
Yes.
And I suspect we're prepared to do it, with the exception that I think we also all agree this language is
Needs improvement.
yes, it's not enough. So it needs some editing, and it's probably not the best thing to do on the fly at 6:45 and beyond. So, do we need to make a motion to have a special meeting? Do we need to make a motion to do that? And if we do, are we prepared to make, or select a date for it? Which would be ideal, I would think.
I don't think that you need a motion, although it would be best if a date were selected now, obviously.
Any recommendations on the date?
End of August?
Just
Not beginning of September? 'Cause it's right
either
after
way,
Labor
just
Day.
so we're away from, Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, so
And then
that's-
also, obviously accommodating the, well before September 6th.
Would the 22nd be too early?
Is that a Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
I don't think it would be too early.
I don't either.
I may have to press the county on getting those values to us. Last time around, last year, they gave us the August numbers in October. But if I go down there and park myself on their wooden benches until they do something for us, maybe we'll get somewhere.
Other than that, there's the 3rd of September, but that's right after the holiday.
I'd much rather do August. Does anybody not agree with that?
I would agree with August.
I like
You wanna
August.
do the 27th, that's Tuesday, give it a little bit more time?
What do you
It's up to
say?
you guys.
In terms of getting the numbers.
If it works for you, it might, they might be a little more amenable, but that's entirely up to you guys. Like I said, I will do whatever I have to do with that. And know that the numbers are going to change between then and December anyway. But the closer we are to that number, the better for the ballot language. What happened the last time around is the number that we put in actually ended up being more than the county gave us, because each set of numbers goes down until the final number in December. When we put that number in, we have to put in the number based on whatever, is the most current valuation numbers they give us. So, the only downside to that is that we won't get as much as it says, and it'll be a bigger number for the public to look at.
Well, what do you guys think in terms of those dates?
Both for me, I'm
Either
just
one.
struggling to try to, if we want to have more time before the deadline of the 6th, or if we want to minimize the amount of time in case there's anything else we need to work on. So what I'm saying is, if we do the 22nd, we've got a little more time to kind of work on things before the deadline. If we wait till the 27th, then we've got a minimal amount of time. But I'll defer to the other members.
22nd?
I think the 22nd would probably be the wisest.
All right. Okay, let's have a meeting the 22nd.
Okay. So that's set then. And that's something that, Jane, you'll advertise then, is that,
Right.
okay,
And then the agenda will be on the website 3 days before.
okay. All right, so, we'll handle language and number, finality, and so forth at that meeting?
That's
Um,
correct, yeah.
And we've already agreed that that's what we will move ahead on, is that singular item. Okay?
Yep.
Any other mill levy discussions before I read about 5 different documents?
I just want to thank the chief for his effort putting this together and giving us direction on how to move forward. So I greatly appreciate your research, because
Absolutely.
we would not be in a position to be able to make the right choices that we need to without your work on the front end. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. All right, Chief, I think you had another item.
Okay, so yes, the one thing that I would recommend not waiting until the 22nd on is basically determining what would be the maximum mill increase that the board would put before the voters. And we have had some discussions on that, and I can kind of explain kind of the overall costs that we're looking at that generated that recommended number.
Excellent.
Right now, with the two firefighters that we have laid off, so replacing those two firefighters is going to be, and these are very rough numbers, $150,000 a year above what our current budget is. We currently are going to need about $335,000 a year, every year, to continue to replace the apparatus in the fleet with the current cost of apparatus, as you saw in the most recent estimate of replacement schedule for that. That number has gone up quite a bit, largely because of the dramatic increase in the cost of apparatus. To maintain the chipping and mitigation crews, we're going to need roughly another $150,000 to replace the grant funding and to ensure that it's stable funding. And then we'd be looking at about $250,000 a year to handle the facility and water system needs moving forward. So that would be, fixing the cisterns. This one is probably going to run well over the $50,000 that we have set aside on it. So between the different facility upgrades, the past due maintenance, that's probably a good figure for what that's going to run for us. And then finally, if we were to go ahead and add a fourth firefighter to handle the increase in call volume that we're seeing, that's going to roughly cost about another $300,000. So with all of those, and accounting for the fact that we will probably start out pretty well and be in the same position, hopefully not as dramatically, but as time goes on, the value of the money we bring in doesn't seem to keep up with the increase in costs. So combined all of those, my recommendation would be to bring the mill up 5.085 to 12.5 mils. And the 5 mil is more or less the round number, but to make that an even mill amount in the future, there's just a tiny bit more with the 0.085 mils included in there. Then it would be a little bit more than 12.5. So, yeah.
Well, I think the 12.5 is a good, whatever we need to do.
I think that's what it's going to take for us to continue to provide services
And those things that you mentioned can be reconfigured into what we tell the public.
Right.
And that's what we're going to use the money for.
Exactly.
And why we need each of those four things.
Right.
Chief, would you be comfortable to also describe just maybe a couple other districts in the proximity, ultimately say based on your recommendation, where this lands us?
Okay, so the lowest mill levy other than Elk Creek in the area is North Fork at 12.0. We have several other districts that are right at 12.5, and then several that are well above that. So the highest in the area is Platte Canyon at 14.29. They have the highest in this immediate area, by no means the highest in the county. That goes to Rocky Mountain Fire at over 20 mils. And there are several other departments that are well above 15 mils. But again, this would put us on the lower average end of the local departments.
You guys have heard a lot of stuff. Any questions on what you've heard? Don't be afraid.
Well, I'm good with 12.5.
Seems like that puts us in line with everyone else.
And, you know, one of the other factors with that is that in the future, and, you know, we've got the potential discussions of consolidating the departments up here to improve efficiency. You know, especially the smaller departments are, you know, looking at how they're going to continue to function as they have the same problem that we do, that they get fewer volunteers every year. So looking at having a comparable mill levy will allow those discussions to continue. And if it makes sense to have a consolidated department that operates more efficiently, we can move ahead. If we go anywhere below 12 mills on that, those discussions can't continue. Because essentially, we would not, you know, we would be having to decrease the other departments' budgets, or that they would have to subsidize us, and obviously, they're not going to do that.
Would this, doesn't it increase accommodate the idea of resident volunteers and housing units and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, so the $250 or $1,000 for facilities, you know, spreading that out over a number of years would fund, you know, those, the two primary ones that we want to get started, which would be Pine Junction and Conifer Mountain. And again, those are primarily because of the existing facilities more than anything. Conifer Mountain, we could probably accomplish with essentially 1 year's budget out of that. Pine Junction would probably take quite a bit more. We will probably have to buy the neighboring lot to accommodate that, the housing at that location, and then obviously build a building on it. So
You mentioned something about double wides.
yeah, but you know, that's like if we have to, because they're going to be less efficient and definitely, you know, probably more of a temporary type of
Yeah.
arrangement. I think that we'd be better off not building anything fancy, but, you know, building a site-built building that's designed to, you know, house. And the main reason I say that is that if we put double wides in, you're going to get, you know, 3 small bedrooms in a double wide. You know, versus if we build a building, we can build one with multiple bedrooms, you know, probably more efficiently than adding.
But
you know,
building
several.
those buildings, wouldn't that require the bond issue?
If we did not borrow money to do it, it would not. So, in other words, if we built it, you know, after we had saved up a couple of years
Oh, I see.
worth of funds to do that.
In a planned way.
Exactly,
In a
yeah.
building fund or something.
Right,
Right.
right.
We have a small piece of property for sale that was never used,
Right.
that could be converted, sold, and the proceeds to go to the construction.
Yeah, the property up on Black Mountain,
Right.
yeah. I'm not sure what the value of that property is, we'll have to,
Well, it's something. you know.
Something, yeah.
We decide to go with the housing.
So is everyone comfortable with what's been recommended by the chief, and I think very, very well explained?
Yes.
And while you think about that, I'll say it another, or ask another way as well. I mean, does anyone feel that our community would prefer or even accept a much lower standard of service?
Makes no sense.
No, I don't think it does either. But I'm open to discussion. So we're all unanimous then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, Jane, I don't think I saw a document for the cancer award, did I, so?
Well, that was the last.
Did I did hit that, okay, sorry.
That's the repayment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's it.
All right, I got off track.
And then, can you
Oh, good,
do a
thank you.
motion on the 5.08 mils also?
Oh, yes,
Yep.
yes. All right, and is that how I should say it, 5.8,
5.085.
5.085? Sure. So I will make the motion, and then if someone will second, that'll be great. So I'll make a motion that we increase the mill rate 5.085 at our special meeting coming up on Thursday, August 22nd. And if someone would second that, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.